Okay, so get this. Google going nuclear to power their AI.
Really?
Yeah, nuclear energy for artificial intelligence.
Wild, right? It's certainly not the first thing that comes to mind. What's the story?
Well, we're diving into this article from Nikkei Asia, and it's saying Google's looking into, get this, nuclear power to keep up with the crazy energy demands of their AI stuff.
Wow. Okay, so to unpack this, we got to talk about just how much energy we're talking about. People hear AI and they think lines of code.
Right, not giant power plant.
Exactly. But the reality is, AI, especially the kind Google's building, needs a ridiculous amount of power. We're talking massive data centers running 12 and 4/7. It's a huge deal.
And this isn't just speculation. This article actually mentions Google's own emissions going up since 2019, and they're blaming it on, you guessed it, the AI boom.
Which is kind of ironic, right? Because Google's all about that green image, going net zero emissions. So how do they square that with needing more juice than ever?
Yeah, it's a tough spot. And that seems to be where this whole nuclear idea comes in.
Hmm.
The article specifically mentions Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai, right?
Mm.
And he's apparently looking into additional investments beyond just solar and wind power.
So, like what? Building their own nuclear reactors?
Well, not quite. The article actually uses the term small modular nuclear reactors, or SMRs.
Okay.
SMRs. So not the giant cooling towers and stuff everyone pictures with nuclear. I've actually read a bit about these SMRs. They're supposed to be way different.
Well, size, for one. They're much smaller, hence the small modular part. So theoretically, you wouldn't need these sprawling facilities. They could be way more, I don't know, integrate them into existing infrastructure maybe, which when you think about the scale of Google's operations, might make sense for them.
Interesting. But are they as safe as they claim? Because that's the first thing anyone thinks of with nuclear, right? Like safety has got to be a huge concern, especially for a company like Google with, their reputation and everything.
Right. And to be fair, this Nikkei Asia article, it doesn't dive too deep into the safety specifics of these SMRs. I mean, it mentions Google looking into them, but how far along are they in that process? Do they have any concrete plans? Unclear.
Yeah, lots of unknowns. But I think the big takeaway here is Google going nuclear. That's a huge deal.
Totally. I mean, we're talking about a massive tech giant potentially turning to nuclear power to fuel their AI ambitions if they actually go through with it. Who knows what kind of ripple effect that could have?
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We'll dive deeper into those potential impacts right after this. So, nuclear-powered AI from Google. I mean, are we in some kind of alternate timeline here? It just seems kind of wild.
I know, right? It's like Google, the guys with the green energy pledges, are thinking about going nuclear.
Exactly. It seems like a total contradiction.
Well, maybe not totally. I mean, remember the article did say their emissions are already up because of all the AI development.
True, but it's still a big leap to go from we need more power to let's build a reactor.
Well, maybe not build necessarily. Remember, we're talking about these SMRs. Plus, the article did mention other tech giants already using nuclear power.
Oh, right, like Amazon and Microsoft. They're already in the nuclear game to some extent.
Exactly. So maybe for these huge companies with their massive data centers and energy demands, it's not as far-fetched as it sounds.
Yeah. But it still doesn't totally explain why nuclear, I mean, is it just about being green? Because nuclear power is carbon-free, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. Remember Google's whole thing about being carbon neutral? Nuclear plays into that, but it's also about reliability, right? Solar and wind power, they're great, but they're not always there.
Yeah, the sun's not always shining, the wind's not always blowing. I get that.
Exactly. Nuclear, on the other hand, it's constant, it's always on. And when you're talking about something like AI, which needs a ton of power all the time, that reliability is crucial.
Okay, so it's reliable, it's green, but there's still got to be more to it. Why is nuclear suddenly back on the table, even in this new, smaller form?
Well, think about it. AI is not slowing down, right? In fact, it's just getting started. Remember what Pichai said in the article about the trajectory of AI investments? They're going all in on this.
Right, he made it pretty clear that AI is going to be everywhere.
Exactly. So they're probably thinking long term. Maybe they're worried that even with renewables, they won't be able to keep up with the energy demands of AI in the future.
So nuclear's like their insurance policy. Their way of guaranteeing they'll have enough power for whatever crazy AI stuff they come up with next.
Could be. It's like if they're right about AI being this huge thing, they need to make sure the lights stay on, literally.
That makes sense. But let's say Google actually goes through with this, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean for the rest of us? Like for the average person, what's the impact of Google going nuclear?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's hard to say for sure, but it could be huge. Think about it. Google's Google. Whatever they do, other companies pay attention.
Yeah, if Google says nuclear is cool, suddenly it's cool for everyone.
Right. And if that leads to more investment in nuclear, well, maybe we'll see faster development of these SMRs, maybe even safer designs down the line.
Okay, so maybe some positive outcomes. But are there downsides? What about the risks? I mean, nuclear's not exactly known for being risk-free, right?
True, but that's the thing about technology, isn't it? There's always risks, always trade-offs. The question is, do the potential benefits outweigh those risks? It's a conversation we need to have.
And it's not just a conversation for tech companies,
Yeah.
right? It's something we all need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. Because if AI really is the future, then figuring out how to power that future sustainably, safely, that's everyone's responsibility.
Right. Wow, okay. So much to unpack there. From Google's green goals to the future of energy, who knew AI could be so complicated?
It's more connected than people realize. Energy, technology, the environment, it's all intertwined. But hey, that's why we do these deep dives, right?
Right. To connect the dots and try to make sense of it all.
Hmm.
And speaking of connecting the dots, this whole nuclear thing, it raises another big question, maybe the biggest one yet. What does this all mean for the future of AI? I mean, where do you even begin to answer a question like that? It's huge.
Yeah, it really is. And it goes way beyond just the tech stuff.
Right. It's about, like, what kind of future we want.
Right, exactly. Are we willing to rethink our whole approach to energy to make AI work?
And it's not just about whether it works,
Yeah.
right? It's about doing it safely. Especially with something like nuclear, there's no room for error.
Absolutely not. We're talking about potentially putting these SMRs in closer proximity to where people live, right? So the safety standards, the regulations, they all have to be rock solid.
No more like, oops, our bad moments, like with some of those older nuclear plants, right?
Exactly. And even beyond the safety stuff, there's the whole perception issue, right? People hear nuclear and they freak out. There's a lot of baggage there.
Yeah, decades of, like, Cold War fears and those disaster movies don't exactly help. But this article, it kind of flips the script on all that. Suddenly, nuclear isn't the villain, it's the potential savior of, well, the internet, basically.
Right. And maybe that's what needs to happen. We need to have a more nuanced conversation about nuclear power, especially with these new SMRs coming into play. Because if AI really is going to change the world, then figuring out how to power it responsibly, sustainably, that's on all of us.
It's a big responsibility
Mm-hmm.
and a lot to wrap our heads around. But hey, isn't that what these deep dives are all about? Challenging our assumptions and all that?
Exactly. It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture. And I think this whole Google going nuclear thing, it really highlights just how interconnected everything is these days.
Totally. I mean, we started with a story about AI, and now we're talking about nuclear power, climate change, global energy. It's wild.
And it shows how one decision by a company like Google could have ripple effects way beyond Silicon Valley, you know? We could be talking about a whole new era of nuclear power driven by the demands of AI. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Mind-blowing is right. But that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Hopefully our listeners are just as mind-blown as we are.
And hopefully a little more informed, too.
To wrap this up, we just dove into an article about Google potentially going nuclear to power their AI ambitions. It's a wild ride. From the energy demands of AI to the future of nuclear power, it's clear that these advancements are forcing us to confront some big questions. How do we power the future? What are the risks and rewards of these new technologies? We may not have all the answers, but hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this exploration, and remember, the future is what we make it. Keep those brains buzzing, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.